What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. In lieu of a meta discussion for Worlds 2019, I will be presenting some data I've collected and also my own Worlds 2019 meta speculation. I kind of don't like the idea of doing a Worlds meta discussion because players have secret techs and decks they can't really talk about and they don't want to disclose their lists, and that's perfectly understandable. This is Worlds Championships. And also the meta changes like by the hour now that we're getting down to less than 24 hours before deck lists are due at 8 p.m. local time in Arcanine Labs for day one. So I'd kind of just rather look at data and talk about my own opinions rather than bring some other guests on the channel for this particular video. We're going to start out by looking at the week one. So I should say this before. So starting 3 weeks ago, I asked in Hey Fonte, the Facebook forum or Facebook group, what do you think the 4 most popular decks will be? And I listed all the decks that you have here in front of you. And hundreds of people responded with their 4 most popular decks that they think will be at day 1 of Worlds. And this is week 1. So this is not this past week, not the week before, but the week before that when I asked. These are the responses that we've gotten. So with 3 weeks out from Worlds. And then we're going to look at 2 weeks ago and then also this past week. So week 1, 2, and 3. 3 being the most recent, 1 being the farthest away from us. So week 1, 3 weeks ago, the community that chose to be involved in this poll said that Pikarom, Malamar, and Green Rushy were the top 3. But week 1, looking at this, there's significant difference between the top 2 decks and the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then another drop off between 5 and 6. So if you'll look here, the Pikarom and Malamar are pretty close. That you can say those are like the top 2. Pikarom is not far ahead by a lot, but then Green Rushy, there's a huge drop off between Malamar and Rushy, something like 10%. And then Green Rushy, Ability Blounds, and Dark Umbreon are pretty close, and then another drop off, and then another drop off, and you'll see where the rogue decks really are. So like there's kind of a 6 meta decks up here at the top, and then the rest are kind of rogue. Not many people think they would be popular. Going into week 2, Pikarom, Malamar, and Green Rushy stay the top 3, but Green Rushy gets a lot closer, and Pikarom and Malamar become even closer to each other. Darkrai, Umbreon, and Blacephalon ability switch spots in 4 and 5, but there's not too much difference there. The top 6 remain the same, and the bottom rogue decks remain the same. Neither move from rogue to meta or meta to rogue, but Green Rushy does get closer. And then in week 3, Malamar takes quite a significant jump up past Pikarom. I believe it was 3 to 4% of a jump. So Malamar this past Monday and Tuesday when I polled, or Tuesday and Wednesday, so 2 days ago when the poll started, Malamar became the most expected to be popular with Pikarom and Green Rushy in 2 and 3. But note, the Malamar, Pikarom, and Green Rushy have never moved from the top 3, and then Blacephalon, Umbreon, and Mew Mew have not moved from 4, 5, and 6, and Shedinja has been 7 for all of them, I believe. Yeah, Shedinja was just about tied with Green Blounds week 1, just above Beheem week 2, and then just tied with Green Blounds again. Yeah, Shedinja and Green Blounds are really close week 3. So here is a chart where you can look at the week 1, 2, and 3 side by side. So Pikarom has the blue, red, and yellow. Malamar has blue, red, and yellow. Follow them by week 1, week 2, and week 3. You'll notice that as the weeks got closer to Worlds, week 3 being the closest, just a few days ago when I took the week 3 poll, that the percentages of the sample that voted started leaning more towards the known meta decks to be popular, and we kind of ruled out which rogue decks are going to be just about non-existent at Worlds. So yeah, we had more people certain of the top 3 or even the top 6. So like I said, I asked people to vote for what they think the 4 most popular decks would be at Worlds. I very clearly said, please don't vote for what you think the best deck is or your favorite deck, but always there can be some error from the voters with that. So I do agree. I do think Pika Ram Malamar and Green Reshi will be very, very popular for day 1 of Worlds. And I do think there is a drop-off between their popularity and then the popularity of the next 3. And then from there, the others are very, very much less popular. Articles that come out the day before and the day of Worlds can definitely change things. And Peter Kika did release another article recently on his Green Blounds or Reshi Blounds, so that popularity might spike up a bit more than these speculations show, but I do think these will be pretty accurate. So the next poll I took was a little less of a poll. I just made a post in a couple forums and on my own Facebook saying if any Worlds competitors for Masters Division Day 1 would like to answer a few questions, message me on Facebook and you can answer them. I had somewhere between a dozen and 20. I want to say 15 or 16 participants, and I also put my own answers into the questions as well since I'm competing in Worlds Day 1. So the first question was, what do you think the safest day 1 play is? And I only took one answer. So Green Reshi and Pika Ram were tied as the safest play amongst these Worlds competitors that wanted to answer the questions, which, by the way, they're all anonymous. I won't be saying who, but they all had 550 points or more and will be competing in day 1 and in Masters Division. So yeah, Green Reshi and Pika Ram tied as the safest day 1 play, and Psychic Malamar as second, and those were the only 3 archetypes mentioned for what do you believe the safest day 1 play is. The next question, 2 out of 3, was what do you believe the top 5 best decks are? This was not by popularity, just what do you think the top 5 best decks are in this meta? And these, again, are all of the... or what do you think the top 5 best decks will be at Worlds? And this includes every answer I got. I left it as a blank so they could just fill in whatever they wanted to say. Pika Ram, Green Reshi, and Psychic Malamar, top 5 best decks, and our speculatory polls also showed that those should be the top 3 decks if the community is correct. The top 3 most popular decks if the community is correct. My bad. So yeah, Pika Ram, followed by Green Reshi, followed by Psychic Malamar, and they all have just one answer less than the next. And then Blacephalon the Ganadel, Tina Chomp Malamar, Dark Box, Mewtwo Box following. So if you combine the Tina Chomp Malamar and the Ultra Malamar into Psychic Malamar and just make it all Malamar variants, that would actually take up the top 1 best deck. It would replace Pika Ram and knock everything down a notch. But I did not want to combine them here. I think for popularity wise, it was okay to combine the Malamar variants, but here when you're asking what do you think the strongest decks are, it's a little different in my opinion. So with the popularity, I'll go back to week 1 just to reference. We saw like a huge drop off between numbers 2 and 3, and then another drop off between 6 and 7. And then week 2 we saw 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, and then the rest. And then week 3 we saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and barely even 6, and then the rest. So here, looking at the 5 best decks, I think you see an obvious top 3. The 4 is kind of alone with the indifference wise, and then we have Tina Chomp Malamar, Dark Box, and Mewtwo Box, and I believe you could say Shedinja's lumped in with those as well from these answers. And then the 3 one-off answers that we received were whatever Japanese secret deck comes up, Reshi Blounds, which is Green Blounds or Kika Blounds, and then Ultra Malamar. But I do think that Pika Ram, Green Reshi, and Psychic Malamar have solidified themselves as the expected best and most popular decks with things like Blacephalon, Darkbox, and Mewbox not far behind. The final question of 3 that I asked these Worlds competitors that messaged me and were interested in answering some questions to help with data were, what do you think of the top 3 decks, with the best conversion rates from making it from day 1 into day 2 will be? It's unanimously Pikarom and Green Reshi as the top deck, I believe, here. They're tied for first, and then we had Blacephalon, Mewtwo, Box, and Psychic Malamar in second, and then the rest kind of low. We did have a fair amount of one-off answers, and many people gave me qualitative responses as well, saying like the Aerodactyl answer and the Keldeo GX answer and then the Ganadel Checkmate answer. Like, people or groups that bring these decks are going to be smaller groups of players, and they think that these decks, if perfected by a small group, will have very high success rates in making it from day 1 to day 2. Whereas Pikarom and Green Reshi are going to be played by players of all skill levels from all countries, with all kinds of different lists. So it's harder for those to have a very good conversion rate. But I think the high votes for Pikarom and Green Reshi kind of came from them being very safe decks to play. And the 2 safest decks from this data, Green Reshi and Pikarom, were also the 2 highest for day 2 conversion rates. So the rest is going to be my thoughts. So I think for a good performance in day 1, the deck has to be consistent, aggressive, and finish matches without drawing, because a draw is basically like a loss. So consistency, obviously you want to set up a fair amount of time. Good players, great players, professional players will say something like 75% to 80% or better of the time you should be setting up in the first couple turns and doing what you want your deck to do. That's kind of obvious. You want to win games, and you win games by setting up and doing what your deck is built to do. Your deck should be aggressive because you want to take advantage of opponents' decks that are not setting up, that are not consistent, and that aren't aggressive themselves. And finishing matches without draws is pretty self-explanatory. You want to be able to close out games, or at least take a long game 1 and succeed in winning it. And so not going on to game 2 and losing and then going to a tie. You want to be either able to play 3 moderately timed games, or just take 2 quick wins, or 1 really long win, maybe if you're playing something like Shedinja or a new type of stall deck that may come out. And this will kind of reflect in the decks that I like when we get to my top choices. For a good performance in day 2, I haven't put too much thought into this up until this past week, just because I don't want to waste practice and testing and meta speculation for day 2 when I still have to make it into day 2 myself. But for those of you that do and want something to think about when we get there, I think that for a good performance in day 2, you need some sort of variance or high rollness in your deck. We've seen, like, last year, Zoro Garb was a very consistent deck with not much high roll, and so was Malamar. They got second, but top 4 had 2 Rayquaza GX decks that Rayquaza GX mills the top 3. There's variance there. The Let Loosing in Rayquaza had variance with it. The Puzzle of Times in that deck, you could mill them and then you don't get them back, but also they could help really, really well if you mill things you wanted and then you could just get them with Puzzle of Time. So variance and high roll is important in day 2 because there's such a slight difference in skill level between all of the players in day 2, and you can't really rely on inconsistency and misplays as much as maybe you could in day 1, where it's already a little bit less rare than other play environments like regionals because you had to get an invite to play in day 1. You could counter the day 1 meta, which definitely happened last year with decks like Drampa Garb, Bayonet, to counter the 1 prize Buzzwole based decks that showed up in day 1. And then, of course, surprise decks or surprise techs in the expected decks. Again, trying to get some sort of advantage that's not playing better than your opponent. If you're both playing very well and both of your decks are consistent, surprise techs or things that your opponent have not accounted for can really help, in my opinion, or at least I speculate that it can. So we're gonna finish up this video. It's 2:30 a.m. I still need to pack and make deck lists for my top 3 choices, and then try to secure the cards for them, and then decide on the car ride what I actually want to play. But my top 3 choices, number 1, these are not in any order, but I'm going to go with what my most practiced deck is, which is Psychic Malamar. This is the deck that I've practiced with the most. I started playing with this like days after NAIC, possibly the day after. And I really like the versatility of Psychic Malamar, because you have Tina's, and then you have a slew of GX options like Sigalith GX, Dawnwings GX, Espioxus GX, Gengar Mimikyu GX, even Ultra Necrozma with a Metal Energy. There's a lot of tech choices, and it's the best and possibly one of the only good single prize based decks or archetypes going into the world's meta. It bears a lot of 50-50s in my opinion. Games where it's not, you can't really high roll with the deck too much, in my opinion. It feels pretty safe to me. It does have some setup issues, but every deck does. I feel like it sets up turn 1 very well, and then turn 2 you have to grind to get to your Malamars, and then you might be fine. But I really like this deck due to its versatility, its single prize based strategy, and also the spread, because Custom Catcher is our Gust, or like our generic Gust right now since we lost Guzma. And with the spread of things like Esper and Espeon Deoxys Tag Team, you don't need a Gust if you can finish off Pokemon on the bench with the likes of those attacks. My second choice is Pikarom. I haven't been very publicly a fan of Pikarom in the past couple weeks in my articles or possibly videos or even just Twitter and on my streams. In the past few days, I've switched my list up a bit for Pikarom, and I do think it can be built to be one of the most consistent decks in the meta, or at least one of the most consistent discovered decks in the meta. I'm really not a fan of Pikarom. It's just very bursty. Games are usually decided pretty quickly with Pikarom, but I like the power that it has. I think the list that I've been playing is like almost optimal. I still have like 1 slot that I'm trying to decide on what to do with it. But I think it's very consistent. There's like just a few decisions and sequencing things you can do each game, but if you do those perfectly and you get the consistent start and the turn 1 full blitz, there's not a lot your opponent can do about it unless they also get an equally explosive start. So it feels like a really good pick for day 1. Yeah, we'll see if I decide to go with it. My last pick is so just saying, these aren't in any order. Psychic Malamar is the deck that I've played the most and tested with the most and feel the most experienced with. Pikarom is the deck that I think objectively is probably the most consistent and safest play. And then Mewtwo Box is kind of my wild card pick. The deck that I've played just a handful of games with the current list I have built right now. I am not very confident at all in my ability with the deck at the moment, since I know the list inside and out now since I helped with it a bit. But the matchups I'm a bit shaky on some of the matchups. I do think you can beat the top 3 with it: Malamar, Reshi, and Pikarom. But having given up on Mewtwo Box a couple weeks ago and then just coming back to it as of maybe yesterday, this is the deck I'm the least confident in my ability to play, and also I'm not really sure if I'm looking at it with like new deck goggles or if it's actually good. But we'll have to see. I did some more testing tonight with and against Mewtwo Box, and also with my other 2 possible choices, so we'll see what happens there. But I do think Mewtwo Box, if built correctly, I'm not saying I have it built correctly, but if it is built correctly and played perfectly, and you don't get extremely unlucky with prizing your specific single card inclusions, that you play like a myriad of different GX attackers in the deck. If you don't prize them in their respectable matchups, I think you could do really well with this deck in either day 1 or day 2. Like, the deck is just a beast when you can have the attackers you need, and you have energy on the board, and you have built your deck to have the correct text for the meta. So, you might wonder why Green Reshi is not in my top 3, since it was the top 3 for everybody, really. I just cannot stand the reshizard starts. 2 nights ago in testing, I played 8 games with the deck in a row, and 5 of my reshizard starts, I went 1-4 in the games I started Reshi, and then I went 3-0 or 4-0 in the games that I started Volk. And that difference in win percentage just really bothers me, and it's been like that throughout all my testing, but I originally was playing 2 Reshi, 4 Volk, but that also is bad, because then if you prize a Reshi, you could be screwed. Right now I'm just rambling on at this point, but I'm not playing Reshi. As far as I know, I'm not playing Reshi at this moment, because I don't like the volatility of the Reshizard starts versus the Volk starts. It just feels like you're playing almost a different deck when you start Reshi as opposed to starting Volk. So I'm going to wrap up this video here. I hope you enjoyed some of the speculation and the data and my personal opinions for Worlds. This should be going up at some time in the AM of Thursday, the day before Worlds, and also the day that deck lists are due for day 1. So if you're at home waiting for the stream, maybe you enjoyed this video, or even if you're going yourself, you can hear some of my opinions to either validate your own thoughts or give you some new thoughts. Hope I didn't confuse you too much. I have not been sleeping, and you might notice that this was a little more rambly and less of a outlined video as you might be used to on this channel. But like I said, I hope you still enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.